Whenever you're ready, introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lisel Joseph, and my pivotal circumstance happened when I lived in New York City in 2001. I'd recently moved there, and I was looking for a job, and my roommate at the time, her friend worked at a restaurant called Windows on the World, which was at the top of the World Trade Center. And he, got me in, and I had my interview. I had my second interview and everything, and, I pretty much had the job, and it was just, a matter of me starting, and they showed me where I was going to sit, where my office was going to be, and everything like that. And before you know it, they called back and they said they were going to go with somebody else. And I was so angry at God because this was my dream job, and it was hook up, it's who you know. And so I had first interview, second interview, and they showed me everything. I was introduced to people, and then all of a sudden, no job. And I was just so angry at God. And of course, fast forward a few months later, and September 11th happened, and almost nobody made it out of Windows of the World. So I realized that I was spared. And even sometimes when I, act bratty and I pray for something, it doesn't happen. And, the Holy Spirit just reminds me, September 11th, I know what happened. I know what's going to happen. And even though you may not understand, you just have to trust me.
Good morning again. We're excited to have you guys here as we wrap up our series that we've been in for a few weeks called 5 Things God Uses to Grow Your Faith. And so if you want to follow along, we're going to have our notes going to be in Oasis NFL.info, or you can use the Bible app. And of course, all the verses will be on the screen as well. But my name is Jeremy, and I'm just so glad you are here today because I believe, again, that God's going to use this morning to at least begin to help us understand what God is doing, even when it seems like we're not sure if he's actually doing anything or if he's even a part of our situation. So we're going to be realizing again that life is full of surprises. Life is full of surprises. There are things that happen every single day to us that are unexpected. And we want to realize again that some of those are really, really good. But since it's part of life, some of those are really, really not so good as well. And we just kind of want to begin to help each other understand that each unexpected event that happens in our life, it's a surprise to us. It's actually a divine opportunity that God is able to use every event that happens to us in our life to do something in us. And we want to realize that circumstances are a part of our faith story. Sometimes, again, when you're going through a circumstance, you may not realize that God is using it. You may not realize what God is doing. But sometimes we look back after we get through it. We look back and realize, oh yeah, God had his hand all over that. Oh yeah, God was at work even on the darkest days or even on the best days. God was at work and doing something. And we realize that as we look back that moment can become a defining moment. You see, we realize again that in those moments of uncertainty and in those moments of unexpected events, that God becomes more than just, oh yeah, there's a God out there, but he becomes my God. It's a personal situation. The Bible, as we go through that situation, as we go through those circumstances, it's not just a story of what God did back then, but this is what God is doing now. You can recognize and see yourself as part of the story. And the God that's the same today, yesterday, and forever, he's still at work in our life. And sometimes in those moments when the circumstances seem bigger than life, that's when God is reintroduced to our situation. Oh yeah, I need a bigger God. Oh yeah, I need a God that I can't put in a box and I can't figure out. I need a God who's bigger than me and bigger than my life that I can trust in and put utter and absolute confidence in. And it's in those moments we cry to reach out to him that we see God move and build our faith. C.S. Lewis, he wrote this phrase that perhaps you've heard before. He wrote it out of a book called The Problem of Pain. And here's what he says. God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And literally, sometimes in our life, we can understand that God works in the good times and God works in the average times, but sometimes in those pain, in that moment, that God is actually trying to get our attention. He's trying to wake up a world that's forgotten about him. And so we want to realize again that God's able to use everything. And what God is doing is he is seeking to build our faith. And so today, kind of the overall idea is this. There is an undeniable relationship. There is an undeniable relationship or connection between big and bad circumstances and our faith. The big circumstance, again, can be really big. Oh, yes, the job promotion. Yes, I'm excited. Or the bad, the job demotion or the job loss. God is able to use and work in each of those circumstances and to do something with our faith. And so we're going to hear some stories today from our own Oasis church family to share again as they look back what God used as a pivotal circumstance in our life. So the first story we're going to hear today and watch today is from Ivan and Tanisha Reales and their son Javier. So if you would, let's join their story. Watch this.
A week before Christmas, 2015, our son Javier got sick. He got an ear infection, which wasn't a big deal. Got ear infections throughout his childhood, so we weren't alarmed by that. I took him to the doctor and they prescribed an antibiotic, so we started it right away. And we started to notice, I think maybe right around Christmas or the 26th, we started to notice some odd behavior. My husband and I were wondering, what he was doing, and we said, hey, come back and take off your shoes, and he seemed confused by that, and he took them off, didn't really put them where they would normally go by the door, and then said something to us about wanting to go take a nap. At this time, he was 12 years old. He was in 6th grade, so naps were a thing of the past. I had prepared his cereal and had it ready for him, and I remember him sitting down at the table and just looking at the bowl of cereal, and he didn't have any sort of reaction on his face, but he looked at me and he said, "Am I supposed to eat this?" And so at that moment, I was thinking, okay, and he wasn't joking, and so, because he can kid around and joke around, and we love that about him, his sense of humor, but he wasn't joking at all, and so I was just like, I don't know what's going on. Why is he asking me if he's supposed to eat this? So I called my brother, and my brother's a doctor in Georgia, in Marietta, and I was describing to him some of the symptoms or some of the things that he had been doing for the previous days, and my brother said that we needed to get him to the pediatrician as soon as possible. I spoke with the pediatrician outside of the room, the examination room where Javi waited with my friend, and just told her what was going on, and she agreed that it was very strange, and suggested that right away we go home and get some things together and head to Wolfson's, and that he was admitted. This was on the 28th of December, and 2015 again, and we spent 6 nights in the hospital. We ran a bunch of tests. Specialists came in from every different area running all these different tests. We had family members that were first and foremost praying for us. So they ran all these tests and couldn't find anything that was wrong. And so as each day passed, we just started to see that he would continue to slip further and further away from us, sort of mentally, like cognitively, in terms of his thinking abilities. He would barely have a conversation with us. If we asked him something, he would repeat the question and then give maybe a one-word answer. And those things were absolutely terrifying because we didn't know what was wrong. And when you feel like you can't help your child because it's something beyond your control, you sort of feel helpless. And so, again, we had people praying, and I continued to read my devotionals every day. You want to keep hope alive in terms of what's, going to be the outcome. But when you don't have an answer about what's wrong, it's kind of difficult. So I felt like our family and our friends really rallied around us, and emotionally and spiritually from where they were, and supported us through this, because it was definitely the scariest thing that we had to deal with at that, and still since as parents. At some point he just really started to retreat more into himself, and so I compare it to having a grandmother, two grandmothers that went through Alzheimer's. As far as his ability to function, he wasn't himself at all. This kid who is math is his strong suit, he was taking pre-algebra in 6th grade. He couldn't tell us what 2 + 2 was in the hospital, and the only thing that they found after one test, the only thing was a slight infection of the brain tissue, something called acute encephalopathy, and they couldn't say what really triggered it. So the turning point was when it sounds kind of crazy to say it now, but I had a hair appointment. And so you had encouraged me to keep the appointment and go, just to get out of the hospital, because I'd been there around the clock. So I went to the hair appointment, and I was telling my stylist, and I was telling another stylist there about what was going on, what we were dealing with at that moment at the hospital. And her name is Pat. The other stylist said to me, what you need to do is, while you're there, you need to pray for the healing for other people, the other kids that are there that you see. The other kids that you see that are going through things that are, now that you know that your son, it didn't seem like it was life-threatening, so we knew that that was off the table, but it was just a reduced sort of mental capacity, and behavior-wise, not really knowing how to do things anymore. So she said, you need to pray for other people's kids that are there, that are going through cancer, and other treatments and things like that. And watch, just wait and see. Once you start getting your focus off your son, not to say to ignore our son, of course, but we were so consumed with what was going on with him. She said, just start looking at others around you and start praying for them. And it didn't really make much sense to me at the time, but I was like, okay, I'll try it. And there were parents that were holding their young kids in their arms because they couldn't walk. Or others that were walking and they had like IV attached, and I just started praying for the other ones that I could see around me. It was a small group, maybe like 20 of us. And I started praying for them. And, I wish I could say that, something incredible happened at that moment, but nothing did. It just felt good to pray for them. She forgot to tell me that would be a benefit of it, that it would feel good to pray for them. And Javi, who didn't initiate conversations anymore. It had been a couple of days now where he just wouldn't start a conversation at all, and barely respond. So he said to me as I was coming out of the bathroom, he said, "Help." And it was barely audible. So I wasn't sure if I'd heard it or not. And I said, I'm sorry, what did you say, sweetheart? And he said, "Help." And I leaned closer and I said, "What do you need help with?" And he said, "I'm confused." And so for him to acknowledge that, I felt like something was starting to change. Something was turning. There was something else, a commercial on TV that was about a phone or some electronic device. And I think, you remember that? And I think you'd made a joke about getting it for yourself or getting it for him or something, and he had some kind of snide remark to make about it, or like, "Yeah, right, Dad," or something that showed like sarcasm and things that we had obviously taken for granted for 12 years. But all these things were just, whatever he was saying to us was amazing. So medical staff was baffled. We were somewhat surprised. Family members, people of faith, we're not surprised because we knew that this was God at work. And we had never experienced anything so scary in our lives with our son. And on the other hand, so miraculous in terms of how the recovery came about. So, and I guess I just want to encourage people that if you're ever faced with something that's so terrifying that you have nowhere else to turn, and not that it should be a last resort, but just to hold on to your faith and let people surround you with their love and their faith, because I think their faith stepped in where ours might have been a little weak at times when we were not seeing any progress or any answers, because God can move in ways that you just would never ever expect, and it will give you the ability to praise him for that. And you can recall that instance when you have something else that comes up. You can recall his faithfulness in that instance and hold on to that, as if you got me through that, then I know that you can get me through anything.
As you heard their story, again, as they were going through it, it was life, right? Unexpected, surprised, shocked. And that's not till they get through it to look back to say, okay, now they can see what God's hand was doing. And so, Ivan and Tanisha, thank you so much for being willing to share your story, and for Javi and be able to do that. And just so you know, Ivan said from the beginning he wasn't going to talk. He was just there to support. He was just there. So thank you guys so much for being willing to share again what God is doing and what God did specifically in that situation. Again, God is able to leverage these moments. God is able to use these opportunities, and there's a connection between our circumstances and our faith. God is able to leverage these to grow our faith and to grow our confidence and to grow our trust in him. Sometimes God uses people, sometimes God uses a teaching, but sometimes God uses life circumstances to increase our confidence in him. And in James chapter 1, verses 2 and 4, we see this kind of being spelled out for us. It says in verse 2, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles," not if, not cross your fingers, they're not going to get it. He says, when troubles, okay, this is part of life here on earth. When troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Wait a second. So when these issues come, we can consider it perhaps an opportunity, maybe even a divine opportunity, that God might be doing something. Why in the world, or what does that even mean? Because troubles and joy, they normally don't go in our same sentence, right? And in verse 3, we kind of see some explanation. We read this, "For you know that when your," what is this word? Faith. "For when your faith is," what's that word? Tested. Okay, so when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. And so what we've been talking about, the idea is that faith is like a muscle. And there's a tension. Am I going to trust God here? Am I going to step out into the unknown? Am I going to put this knowledge to the test? Am I going to serve? Am I going to give? And until we actually put that muscle into work, our faith's not growing. And so what we see here is that James is saying, listen, that you know that when your faith is tested, your faith muscle can grow. And this idea of an enduring faith, not just a faith when the sun is out, not just a confidence in God when the job promotion's happening or everyone's healthy in your house, but a faith that endures when it's raining, metaphorically, and when you're in the valley, and when the job is not so certain, and when your kids are not so, and life is not so certain. This is an enduring faith. We have a chance to grow. And we recognize that verse 4 says this, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. We recognize again that God is all about growing big faith in us, to have a 100% faith, not a 50% or a 35%, but a perfect, complete 100% faith. And as our faith grows and our endurance becomes fully developed, we recognize, okay, we can trust God. And when we said the reason why we want to trust God is the bigger our faith in God is, the closer we are to him. The more intimate, the more connected we are, the more we trust and have confidence in our God. And so we recognize, again, this is God's plan. He's going to allow certain things to test our faith, and we can have joy in that. We can say, okay, God, I know now I don't have to always wait until I look back as we go through it, we can go, okay, God, somehow you're going to use this. Somehow you're going to make this and leverage this for my faith to grow and my trust in you. God is doing something in our lives. God is building something in our lives. There are no accidents in our life that we go through. God is always at work. Now, none of us would sign up for the testing, right? None of us would say, okay, God, we got 6 days free. We're kind of cleared our schedule. We can be in the hospital now. None of us look at that and go, okay, I can check it off the list. But we know that when it happens, we can know that God is at work and that God is doing something in this. We're going to quickly cover kind of the high points of a story that's found in John chapter 11. And in John chapter 11, we are introduced to not only Jesus, but we're introduced to a family. And this family is consisted of Lazarus and Mary and Martha. And this family knows Jesus. They've been in the same house. There's a connection they have with Jesus. And they get the message to Jesus. Listen, Lazarus is sick. You need to come see him. You need to come be a part of it. You need to come heal him. Lazarus is sick. And here's what we see in verse 4 of John 11. When Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened, Lazarus being sick, happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. Okay. Jesus says, listen, okay, I hear that Lazarus is sick, but just so you know, this ultimately is going to wind up with God getting glory. It's going to ultimately wind up with Jesus receiving glory in this moment. So what we can see is that when we encounter sickness, when we encounter illness, when we encounter pain or loss or bad news or breakup, broken heart, God is going to leverage that, is able to leverage that so that he will get the glory in the end. Now again, we don't like this kind of glory, the really negative stuff. We would prefer, God, give me a Super Bowl victory glory, okay? In that moment, I'll give you the glory, all right? And so we were so glad to see the Eagles win the Super Bowl. But as a follower of Jesus, even bigger than a game, even bigger than a team, as a follower of Jesus, I was so excited to hear the coach and the Super Bowl MVP, the quarterback Nick Foles, and other players say, listen, we want to give glory to God. We believe, again, that he's our Lord and Savior. We want to honor him in this moment. What a powerful testimony that we heard over and over and over again. And all of us would prefer that glory. God, I want to go to the ATM and see more money there than I thought I had. I'll give you glory for that. God, hallelujah. All right, you get the glory for this money, extra money. God, give me the scratch-off ticket, the one that's going to work really good. God, I'll give you glory for that one, right? God, I'll give you glory for my kids doing well and honor roll. And God, I'll give you glory for the job promotion. God, I'll give you glory that we got the bigger house that we didn't think we were going to get. And God, we want to give you glory for that, right? But this kind of glory, we don't sign up for. God, we're sick, but you're going to get glory. God, there's an issue with my job. God, there's an issue with my kids. God, there's an issue with my marriage or my romantic life. Maybe there is no romantic life. God, I don't know what's going on, but God, I don't know how you're going to get glory in this, right? And so we would prefer Super Bowl glory, but God says, listen, even in the negative, I'm able to leverage it so that God gets the final say. And God will prove that he is God and he will get the glory. So the word comes to Jesus that Lazarus is sick, but Jesus waits a few days before he moves. Jesus waits a few days, and the whole time while Jesus is waiting before he actually goes to Lazarus, Mary and Martha are watching their brother die. You can imagine all that's going into that. And maybe you've been in that situation. You've prayed. God, where are you? And God, this has got to happen. And God is not showing up in the timing you thought he would. And the situation's getting worse and maybe even resulting in loss. And you're wondering, God, where are you? What's going on? And so finally, Jesus says, when we skip down a few verses, he says to the disciples, listen, okay, get ready. We're going to leave our town and we're going to go to Lazarus. And ultimately, here's what Jesus tells them. Lazarus is dead. Jesus said earlier, this sickness will not end in death. But just so you guys know, Lazarus is dead. And then he says this in verse 15. And for your sakes, talking to his disciples, for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For now, you will really believe. So come, let's go see him. So what we see is that Jesus, on purpose, does not immediately go to Lazarus. Jesus is actually setting up this situation to teach a huge lesson, that he is concerned about faith. He is concerned about the faith of the disciples to believe that God is going to leverage this and set up a circumstance to grow and build our faith. And so what Jesus is saying is, listen, is your healing important? Yes. But what's more important is your faith. What Jesus is saying in this incident is your pain important? Yes. But what's more important than your pain is your faith. Jesus is saying, listen, is your broken heart important? Yes. But what's more important is your faith. We would say, Jesus, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And he would say, yes. To have an increasing confidence in God, to believe, not just hear, but believe that God is in control, that God is in charge. And so much so is he at work that he'll actually set up circumstances to grow and build our faith. For our next story, we want to see the story of Andrew and Sarah Call and their son Isaiah. So if you would, let's watch this together. Watch this.
So we found out when I was 20 weeks pregnant with Isaiah that he was a boy, yay, but that, we didn't care what the gender was, but we found out that there was, for sure, his feet weren't right. He for sure had club feet. Then he had all these other different markers. And we were counseled there to discontinue the pregnancy. But that they weren't sure that he wouldn't live, but that the markers on the ultrasound were indicative of some things that could have made his quality of life. Well, he could have died in utero. We knew we were not going to discontinue the pregnancy because we were like, okay, God, you gave us this baby. If you're going to take him from us, you're going to have to do it. Like, we're not pulling the plug. We're going to have him whenever he's ready to come. But then he didn't do well on a non-stress test when I was 41 weeks pregnant. And they said, we're going to induce you. I really didn't want to be induced. I wanted to wait till he decided to come on his own. So we went to be induced because, gosh, we prayed about it. And I really felt like God had given us the medical professionals he'd given us in that situation, and that I should trust that and just trust it. We said, okay, let's go intervene the heck out of this pregnancy and get the baby out. So we checked into the hospital that night. I couldn't be still. I was, anytime Andrew would get in between my line of sight of me and the monitor that was showing me Isaiah's heart rate, I would get super frustrated and you need to move. And we had been doing all these non-stress tests, and I was aware that Isaiah's heart rate was kind of not in an ideal range. And then it really started tanking. And I kind of wondered why anybody wasn't doing anything, and it was just kind of quiet. And then you were gone by this point. You were gone. Andrew had run because I was so irritable. He had gone home because he was like, let me get some more. My friend Lauren was with us, and she was like, there weren't very many pillows or blankets in the room. And we were like, we're in this for the long haul. I'm about to go through a really uncomfortable labor, have a baby. Let's get some stuff from home so I could be more comfortable. And we lived probably 30 minutes, 20 minutes from the hospital. And while he's gone, I'm watching the monitor and I'm just really like this. I don't know why his heart rate is so low. I don't understand. And nobody's doing anything. All of a sudden, everybody's in my room. So it turns out like they were waiting to call. They had called the on-call doctor in because whoever was there at the hospital wasn't comfortable with what was going on. They had called him in. They were watching me, and then they all came in all of a sudden. And the doctor who was there, which this was totally God. I mean, he's just all over this. So I had a miscarriage in Washington after Abigail, and it was heartbreaking. And we had the best doctor, and her name was Dr. Waldman, and we only had her. I mean, we only had a few visits with her because we lost that baby at around 13 weeks. So, but she just, I don't know. I really connected with her. And who walks into this C-section situation that I did not anticipate? I didn't even know. Like, I didn't even research C-sections. That's not on my screen. Dr. Waldman walks in. I didn't even know she still worked at that hospital. We'd moved away, moved back. So here she comes in, and it was just like,
he was so still when he was born. Like, he just did not move. And I wasn't sure if he was okay when he was delivered. He was very discolored and just did not move for, it felt
longer
like,
than normal.
Yeah, a long time.
Probably wasn't very long.
Yeah, it was probably only like 30 seconds or something like that.
And I didn't know, like, he didn't make a lot of noise, and I was just like, is he okay? Is he okay? And nobody was answering me. I'm laying on the table, and I'm like, why is no one answering me? All you people can walk. Tell me what's going on. And eventually, he was okay, and his hand was weird when he was born. And I was like, does he have all his fingers? What? And Andrew's like, I don't think they know, Sarah. Like, because I kept repeating myself. And it turned out that probably part of the reason he didn't move a lot when he was born is because he has a condition called arthrogryposis, which affects his muscles and joints. And it wasn't just his feet. It was also hands, wrists, elbows, shoulders, overall muscle tone. And we really didn't know what it was. Like, and the doctors in the hospital didn't really know what it was. He was breathing and nursing, and vital things were as they should have been. Really, God really just held us through the whole experience. So one thing that happened is I was so overwhelmed. Like, we didn't anticipate the level of care that Isaiah was going to need, and how many appointments we'd be having, how much travel to the hospital, all that kind of stuff. Plus, I had the other, Abigail and Simeon were little, and it's overwhelming to have little kids anyway. And my grandmother in South Carolina was just heartbroken that she couldn't fix it, and said, I will pay for you to hire someone to help you in your house. And we were like, okay, who are we even going to find? I don't know. I was telling a friend about this, and her mother, who was a nurse who wasn't working at the time, and a mom of 8 kids, and such an amazing Christian woman, was like, well, I'll do it. Sure. So Miss Dolores came and started just mothering all of us, basically. And she was amazing. And she just spoke truth to me and encouraged me and worked in our house and humbled me and loved our kids. Never in a million years would I have picked her out? Could I have picked her out? God totally put that together. There's the miracle that we didn't know this little boy that we were counseled against continuing his pregnancy. He runs, and he climbs, and he's hilarious, and he's such a miracle. And he's impacted so many people's lives that he doesn't even know about. And it's still hard. Like, God didn't fix it. The problem's not gone. He has arthrogryposis. He didn't sleep last night because his feet hurt. For real. And it's hard. It's still hard. But it is also the richest blessing that I could imagine, really. I know he's grown our faith immensely through it. I've known Jesus for a long, long time, but I didn't know him like I know him now. Like I got to know him through this situation.
And it's something that keeps drawing me to, like, I keep praying for him to be healed. He hasn't been miraculously healed completely altogether, and I knew even when he was in Sarah's womb that something was not right, and I remember even starting to pray then before he was born. But he continues. Every day is like a slight little miracle here and there. It's like little things keep happening when his feet start to turn in, and just praying through that, a constant prayer over that, and then that small victory of his foot, like
just looking a little better,
straighten up.
Yeah.
And when he was born, it was like, I don't know if he's ever going to be able to walk, and now he's jumping off tables and and just the placement of where he was, his birth order in our family is amazing. Just to think about how his older brother and sister love him so much, and he looks up to his brother so much, and how that Simeon is like some of the best therapy for him, how he encourages him and he tries to copy his big brother and do all these things and then now he gets to be
a big brother, yeah. So he's not going to stay the baby forever.
Yeah, he's bossing Ezekiel around.
Got somebody pulling him and somebody pushing him. Yeah.
God's hand, it's amazing to see God's hand working in God's hand's in everything. It's really cool when you actually have that eureka moment and you see it. You see God moving.
These are things that you wouldn't sign up for. Right? You wouldn't sign up for that. You wouldn't be like, oh yeah, put our family in that mix. But God's able to use things. God's able to leverage things for our faith to be able to grow. So Andrew and Sarah, thank you so much for being willing to share your story and what God is doing, and to recognize again that God is still doing it in Isaiah's life and still doing it in their family. We want to recognize again, okay, that God, if life's going to happen anyway, and if circumstances are going to happen anyway, and if bad news is going to happen anyway, then perhaps God, maybe you can use this. Maybe this is a divine opportunity to see you move in a mighty way and begin to increase our faith. And as we go back to John 11, we see Jesus having a conversation with Martha. And basically she says, Jesus, if you'd been here, if you left when you got the news, we wouldn't be at a funeral right now. My brother would still be alive. And Jesus is going to show her again that, listen, there's something bigger that I'm after. There's something bigger that I'm concerned about, even more so than your sorrow and your pain that you're going through right now. And in John 11:25, he says this to her. Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. And then he says this, everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. And then he says, Martha, do you believe? Do you have faith in this? Do you have faith in me? Now this, again, is not a good teacher only statement. To actually say that you're the resurrection, the life, doesn't mean you're a good teacher, because you actually have to back that up. You actually have to prove that that is true. And we recognize again that he's saying, listen, anyone who believes in, anyone who trusts in, anyone who has confidence in Jesus will live. And so he says, Martha, do you believe? And my question is to you, insert your name in there. Do you believe? Do you believe this? You see, our goal again is to recognize that God is who he says he is, and will do what he says he will do. And what we can trust and believe in him. And Martha, in this case, you can read it for yourself. She says, yes, I believe. Yes, I believe. And so Jesus begins to utilize and to bring this circumstance to a close. And he sees those mourning around him. And the Bible says in John 11:35, their easiest verse to memorize, Jesus wept. Jesus wept, that Jesus joins in with the people's pain. He feels their sorrow and mourns with them, even though he knows what's going to happen next. And so I want to encourage you as you're going through that circumstance, as you find yourself in that season right now, Jesus is there with you in your pain, in your sorrow, in your questioning, in the mystery. Jesus is there with you. Even though he knows how it's going to end, he's there with you in that. We have a God who's able to empathize with us. This is our God. And so as he mourns with them, he begins to say, okay, what I want you to do, I want you to roll away the stone. And he says this in John 11:40. He says, listen, I'm about to tell you, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? So they roll the stone away, and Jesus prays out loud. Basically, the reason he's praying out loud is not for his Father and him, but basically for those who are hearing this to benefit, to realize that Jesus is not just a good person. He is the Son of God. And God is going to get glory in this. And then he says this, Lazarus, come out of that tomb. And Lazarus comes shuffling out because he's got the grave clothes on him. And he's like, all right, let him free because he's not dead. Remember, I told you this would not end in his death. But Jesus says, I'm going to get the final glory. It'll end with me getting glory. And here's how the story wraps up. I encourage you to read all of John 11 on your own if you don't know the story. But in verse 45, it says, many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. It was resulting in not only God getting glory, but people's increasing confidence and trust and faith in God. And believing is what leads to salvation. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And what we realize is that Jesus created this situation. Jesus allowed this to happen. Jesus was instrumental in this situation to show the connection between our circumstances and our faith. Andrew said in that video, God's hand has always been involved. This is true. Jesus created the situation to allow our faith to grow in the circumstance. And the difference between actually people moving toward God and pulling away from God often in the circumstance often comes down to who are we listening to? Who is in our life? Are the people in our life encouraging us to walk away from God? Are they praying for us? Are they building us up? Are they encouraging us to keep our eyes upon Jesus? Even as Tanisha shared, encouraging us to pray for others even in our hurt. Are we have people who are pushing us toward God or encouraging us to walk away? Often that is what's instrumental to seeing our faith grow in these moments. Pain and tragedy are part of life. And they're part of the story of life here on earth, which is currently under the curse of sin. But it does not have the final say. Jesus has the final say. Jesus changes everything. And we can take heart in knowing that God is doing something in us because he wants to do something through us. God is doing something in us so that he can do something through us. And if you find yourself in the mystery, in the valley, in the uncertainty right now in your personal circumstance, I want to encourage you and I want to challenge you to add this to your prayer. God, I need to see you in this. God, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but God, I need to see you. God, here's my broken heart. I need to see you get glory in this. God, here's my sickness. Here's our illness in our family. Here's the pain. I don't know how it's going to work out, but God, help me to see you in this situation. Increase my faith and confidence in you. See, as we close out this series, God is concerned about growing up big faith in us. Because the bigger our faith in God, the closer we are with him. The more we trust him, the more we're able to know him and experience him and actually have not only him as a part of our life, but our life as part of his story. We recognize that he's at work. So I want to encourage you. Do you believe this? Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life. Everyone who believes in me will have life. Do you believe this? Let's close in a word of prayer today. As we just bow our heads and close our eyes, not only are we closing out this moment, but we're closing out this whole series.